in our breastfeeding journey, it was like all these things that I never thought I would do, or things that I may have been judgy about towards other moms that I was finding myself doing, and was just like, okay, now I get it. Like, now I get why some breastfeed, and like, it was just a really big learning experience for me. And like I said, so humbling, because I think, yeah, I just like, it just brought me into my humanity. Like, I was just like, wow, like all along, I've just had so many like judgmental like thoughts, and like been like comparing, and just all this stuff that is so unproductive. And it was like my time to learn that, like, everyone does their best, and just because somebody is giving their baby formula does not mean anything. I cannot just assume things about people, or assume things about breastfeeding. And I was just like, whoa.
Hello, hello, and welcome to all of you beautiful souls tuning in today to the Heart of the Soul podcast. Earthing Nova on YouTube. My name is Amana, and I am so happy that you're here. This is a space where we remember what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth, navigating the ebbs and flows of change, honoring each other's differences, and connecting about that which unites us. Together, we practice using our voices in the ancient ritual of storytelling, sharing our stories of birth, life, and death, and celebrating how we and they change across time. I hope that soaking in these stories will leave you feeling inspired, connected, and more alive in your own beautiful body and unique life. I hate that it does that. It's so weird.
Yeah.
Oh, hello, hello. I have Katie Watson here with me today. I am just so tickled and excited to share this virtual space with her and you all today. I just can't stop smiling as soon as she hopped on the call. I'm just so happy to be gazing upon you. Katie was a client of mine turned friend, and we, continue to have communications. And yeah, it's been such an honor to walk with you on your journey of this, second pregnancy and birth. And I am just, yeah, really excited to hear your stories today, and grateful to have been able to walk alongside you. And I just have, yeah, so much love for you. And I love our lugs, which is, yeah, love and hugs together, which is something that came out in a voice message and now has stuck in the most beautiful, wonderful way. So I'm just so grateful for you to be here today, and your willingness to share your stories. And yeah, if you want to introduce yourself in whatever way feels good, and if you feel ready to dive in wherever you want to begin, that would be lovely.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and it has just been such an amazing walk with you so far, and I love where it's going. And yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm almost 36. I'll be 36 on the 21st. And I was born and raised in Montana. I've lived here most of my life, and that is a big part of my identity. I love Montana so much, and who it's shaped me to be. And yeah, I love movement, especially in the outdoors. It's my creative outlet, and just continues to be a big part of who I am today. And yeah, that's the most basic little snippet of me.
Beautiful. And so we met when you were pregnant with your second son. And Were you someone who like loved babies when you were little and knew you wanted to be a mother, or did that come later? Or, like what was your maiden into mother journey? Or where does that begin for you?
So I was never one of those women who knew I wanted to have kids, knew I wanted to be a mom, but I have worked with kids a lot in my like adolescence, high school, and even after during college. I babysat a lot and I worked in daycares and I always connected well with kids and I loved working with them, but it was never like from a mothering like part of me. It was more of like they were my friends and I just loved to be with them. So yeah, when I got pregnant, I was not like, I didn't know anything about birth. I had never even thought about it. I was so oblivious to motherhood and what it entailed. And I never was like, I never thought I didn't want kids, but I just like didn't pay any mind to, or I didn't have any ambitions to become a mother or like I didn't, yeah, it was not like something I wanted, but it wasn't something I didn't want. It just happened.
Yeah, did you have people like in your close circle or friendships that you like witnessed mothering or nursing or any of those aspects of?
So after high school, two of my closest friends did have kids, but I was like, I don't know, that was kind of like the beginning of the end of our like not friendship, but like we just like lost contact because, well, I don't know if it's I was oblivious to all that, but I was just in such a different place. I was partying a lot and it just wasn't like part of my brain. Like I just had no concept or understanding of what it meant to be a mother. And then when my younger sister had her kids, I still was just so oblivious and I almost feel bad that I like wasn't able to be there for her more and same with my friends too. Like I was just kind of like, well, they're doing that and I'm doing this and I just didn't know how to be supportive. Like it just wasn't like part of my thoughts and my brain processes. Yeah, so when
Yeah,
my
no, I mean,
friends
you bring up such a good point that it's just like not built into the culture of this like awareness as maidens that like the mothers like really need our support. And I feel the same way, even though like I babysat a bunch and all of that. And yet I still didn't have this like full awareness of what it was like to become a mother in that way. And I share that of like feeling, yeah, some guilt or some regret over like not having supported maybe other women in my life in the same way. And yet I feel like it's just one of those things that you really can't know until you know. Like you don't know until you literally have this little being 24/7, like how full on that is.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So you did have people in your sphere, but you weren't like in close contact with them. Um, and then yeah, how did it go from that to then conceiving your first little wombling?
So Roger and I met in the end of August of 2019 and we like hung out the first or a week after we met in the O'Reilly parking lot. We hung out and spent the day together and we never left each other ever till, we still haven't. We're still together. We spent every together. And 4 months after we met, I became pregnant and surprise too. It wasn't planned or anything. And we were already planning on getting married. And so, yeah, I became pregnant in January of 2020. And then the ride started.
Yes, and what was that pregnancy like for you? Was it, fairly easeful or was it challenging or yeah, how did you navigate all of that?
Physically, it was pretty easy. Um, and that's relative to what I've heard from other women in terms of like physical symptoms. And I didn't have morning sickness. I I was really, really, really tired in the first trimester and so hungry. I know looking back that it was because I had been so restrictive in my eating and so disordered in my eating and my physical activity also, that like it was totally my body being like, you need food and you need rest. And I I continued to work painting houses until almost the beginning of my third trimester. But I remember just being so tired in the morning. Like I would literally wake up like 5 minutes before I had to leave the house and like just be so tired on the way to work. And then I would just clock out at random times of the day and go sit in my Jeep for like an hour or two at a time and just like eat and sit there and just be like, just have to drag myself back in. And my boss was super understanding and awesome. And he
Good.
never like, said anything, but I, yeah, I was just so tired and hungry. And then after, towards like the beginning of my second trimester, I regained my energy and was actually pretty energetic and did, like kept doing like hikes and walks and stretches and, just continued to do that. And I felt really good my whole pregnancy physically.
How about like the emotions? Like, how was that? Like, because you weren't, calling in this pregnancy. So, how was that like for you and Roger? And yeah, what was that all like for you?
So we were excited. We weren't like stressed or worried when it comes to just like the surface, most basic things. And we really, or and I felt like good emotionally about having a baby. I just didn't even know what to expect when I finally gave birth, but I I was pretty like, confident and um I just didn't really have any expectations for what
hmm
I just didn't know what to expect. So, and that was a blessing because I think if I would have like studied birth and pregnancy and motherhood a lot before I got pregnant, I think I would have had more expectations
hmm
and maybe that would have been a little bit harder for me. But the thing that sticks out most to me in terms of my emotional state was um, a lot of stuff started coming up with in my relationship with my mom. And
hmm
I just started feeling like I just did not like our relationship. And we just clashed so much. And there were so many like I was already, before I got pregnant, our relationship wasn't like great. Like we got along fine, and of course I love her and we spend time together, but I just started becoming aware of like so much stuff that I didn't understand what it was. Like I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know how to explain it. Like when she would sense my annoyance with her, which I was always annoyed by her, even before I got pregnant. But when I got pregnant, it was like
Escalator.
um she would try to talk to me about it, and I didn't even know how to deal with it because it was just like basically a life's worth of relationship baggage to unpack that I had no idea how to even approach. So that was really challenging. And um yeah, so like I think emotionally that was probably the hardest part of my pregnancy, was just becoming aware of so many things in not only my mom and Mai's relationship, but in my relationship, the way I approach relationships in general.
Did much like change with you and her in that pregnancy or?
You know, not, I mean, maybe a little bit, but not much, because I didn't even really do any of the work involved in attempting to heal a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
that until I became pregnant the second time.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that's when things really started to change. And now they've changed a lot, and or maybe they haven't changed. I've changed a lot. I don't know that she's changed.
No, but like I heard someone talk about this recently where like when you're in a relationship with two people, like even if only one person changes, it does change the dynamic of the relationship, even if the other person stays the same.
Yeah, totally. And that's definitely like how it is today. Like the way I see things and the way I let things affect me has changed a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
throughout that first pregnancy, like I I didn't change that. I mean, in terms of like relationships and stuff like that, like I really didn't change that much because I wasn't able to do much of the work necessary because I was so preoccupied with like the pregnancy and the birth and my birth plans.
Yeah. What do you know of your own birth from your mother?
I know that I was 2 weeks late,
Mm-hmm. The
and
story that was told to you. Yeah.
yeah, and he cried every day and prayed every day after my due date that I would come, or she would go into labor, because her doctor said that if she didn't go into labor by this date that she would be induced, and she didn't want that. And the day that she was supposed to get induced, she went into labor. And I don't know how long the labor was. I don't know how painful it was. I was born vaginally, and that's all I know. I haven't really, maybe I should. I mean, I do want to know, but like I just haven't felt like super called to ask her to go into detail
Yeah.
about herself.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just curious. I was realizing wasn't sure if I'd asked you that. And of course, during this, I'm going to be asking you some questions that I already know some of the answers to because of our relationship, but for the people that are listening. Yeah. So you're pregnant. Were you also, you said that you and Roger were planning to get married. Did you get married during that time or was that later? Or yeah.
We did, yeah. We got married April 18th, and it was during like the height of COVID. And so there was 14 or 15 people at our wedding. We got married in Great Falls, Montana at this big, beautiful church that we attend sometimes, because we don't go to Great Falls every Sunday for church, of course. But um, and we rented an Airbnb, a big one, and that's where we had our um like reception dinner, and it was amazing. It was great. And yeah, it was smaller than we intended, but it was amazing.
Wonderful. Yes. So you were, how many-ish months would you have been then?
So I was about 3 months pregnant. I was
Okay.
just so
Okay.
can't tell in my wedding pictures, but I could tell.
Yeah. So it was like in that really tired phase that you were also like planning all of these details and all of that on top.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
my mom like spearheaded the planning, which was amazing because I am not like, I mean, I would have got married, just in the middle of the woods somewhere in, I didn't care, but I'm looking back, I'm glad that we had that special wedding celebration, and she spearheaded all the planning, but it also was a source of conflict for us also. So it just,
Mhm. Yeah. So at first, you're kind of wrapping your head around being pregnant, you're planning your wedding, and then you're continuing to grow. And when do you start like looking towards the birth and what, sort of possibilities came into your, framework about the ways that you wanted to birth or where
so probably, well, it was right before we got married. So at the beginning of April, I found the birth center in Missoula because I knew I didn't want to birth in a hospital. I don't know how I knew that. I just knew.
or.
And I went to my first appointment a couple weeks before our wedding, and the midwife there seemed nice and fine. So general and vague. It's just we met that time, and I think I had one or two more appointments, and I just started feeling like I just did not like her vibe, and I was like, I don't know about this lady. And right around that same time, I in a Facebook group I'm in, it's like a vitamin C therapy group. A girl posted her birth story, and it was a free birth story, and I was like, that is what I want to do. Like, I this birth center like seems okay, but I don't know about this midwife, and I just maybe was a little bit foolhardy in terms of like thinking I could free birth, but not even knowing the work involved. Even though like in some ways it's really simple and anyone can do it, but like I was so far from being able to take that responsibility. And so yeah, I was like, this is what we're gonna do, Roger. We're gonna have breast, or we didn't know he was a boy. We're gonna have the home, and he was just like so overwhelmed, or not overwhelmed, but just like, it was just like,
It was like a course change. And like, was that the first time you'd ever like heard of free birth and like he had heard of it? And like, it's this like, yeah.
yeah. And I think he didn't know what to expect even from a hospital birth or a birth center birth. He was just like, okay, free birth, okay. And but I still think he was a little bit like, I don't know, but okay, whatever you think. And so yeah, then I told everyone that I was gonna free birth, and of course was not prepared for people's responses,
Mm,
know how to like take responsibility for that choice and
mhm.
not let what other people thought interfere with that.
Yeah, that's
So
big. That's so big and so hard. And yeah, if you hadn't like been sort of in the culture or awareness of free birth and heard other women speaking to like those challenges of it, I can see how you would be, like so excited that this is your choice. And then you're getting this like mirroring back of like anger and fear and all these other things that are not what you're trying to embody and be.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, well, I'll see if I can find a doula to be there. And I found this girl named Molly who I heard about. Someone I worked with was like, oh, I know a doula. And I happened to have met her before. She worked with one of my best friends at this gift shop. And so I was like, oh, I know Molly. Like, I didn't know she was a doula. And so I got in contact with her. And then I found like a registered doula in our community. And I met with her. And I ended up deciding to go with Molly. And she was like, well, I'll totally support you, but I wouldn't want to be at the birth. And I was like, well, okay. And so we continued to work together. And um towards, I think it was in like August. Rusty was born at the end of October. And I think in August Molly suggests, she's like, maybe you could just, talk to a midwife and a home birth midwife and just maybe see what kind of support they could give you. And I was like, okay. And so I found this midwife, and she was a home birth midwife and like crunchy or whatever. Like, I don't know. She came over to my house a couple times and we visited, um and then so but I still wasn't like committed to having her be at the birth, but she somehow, I felt like I needed to keep her posted on like what was happening with my labor and stuff. So when my water broke, let's see, I'm trying to think of the dates. So my water broke, I think Rusty was due October 13th.
Is when you were like 40 weeks.
That's when I was 40 weeks. Yeah. And, my water broke a week later. So I was like, at that point, I was already kind of like, I'm going past my 40 weeks, and
just like you did when you were.
Yeah. And so I did text her when my water broke, and she said, okay, well, typically I would say if you don't go into labor in the next 18 to 24 hours, I would have my client, I forget how she put it, but basically go to the hospital and get induced. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not doing that.
But then, so you did hire her as your home birth midwife, or you were just sort of in contact with her? Okay.
I was in contact with her. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But she kind of like assumed care, and I'll explain that, or you'll understand what I mean. But she like, I don't know. So I went in, my water broke, no labor happened that night. It was like we're laying down to go to bed, and like my water broke, and then nothing happened that night. And then the next night I started feeling contractions, but they were pretty mild and inconsistent, but it was like all night. And so I labored all night, and then the contractions stopped the next morning. And like by then everyone had known, like my family, everyone knew my water broke, and that he was late. And so then I started feeling like the pressure, and I decided to go to the hospital and get checked. And that's when they, like the nurses and the OB-GYN there, were wanting to induce me. And I was like, no, I don't want to. I want to give myself a little bit more time. And so we left the hospital, and
That's
that
amazing.
night,
So many people, like, once they go in, they have a hard time leaving. So, like, wow,
yeah,
that's
it was,
amazing that you went in and out. Like, waters had been broken for, like, what, 24 hours or something by then. And
it
yeah,
was like, yeah, 36 hours at that point. And yeah, it was really hard to leave. Like they were like, we really like suggest that you have an induction. And I was like, no. And so we left, and I did labor again that night, like all night. And then the next morning, the contractions stopped again.
oh,
And
so
then
you're
by
like sleepless for nights on end. And oh, okay. Yeah.
so yeah, so then by that point, like the next day, we went back into the hospital and got the induction. And before they induced me, they tested me for COVID, and I tested positive. So then they like had to move me into a different room, and it like I didn't get induced for another like 4 or 5 hours, which just now as I'm saying it, I'm like, oh, they really wanted me to get induced, but we're gonna wait 5 more hours. Like, ugh. And
Bizarre. Yeah. And what way did they induce you? What was the form of induction?
Pitocin, through the IV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's how it was. And I did have a birth plan written, so I brought that with, and it was like no fetal monitoring, no um IV fluids, no, please don't wipe the vernix off, no circumcision, no shots like Hep B, vitamin K, um, just like the typical things that like you would see for like a natural birth in the hospital. And so yeah, then I got induced, and I had to be hooked up to an IV like fluids, because that's how they did the pitocin. And like they kind of like led me to believe that like that wish would be granted or something. And then like of course it wasn't. And then with the fetal monitoring, well, they like asked me why all the things that I had on my birth plan, why I wanted them. And I was like, well, I want to be able to like move around. And they were like, oh, okay. And well, the fetal monitoring is wireless. Like it's not hooked up to the thing, but I was still hooked up to like the pitocin drip,
Yeah.
and they still put the monitor on me, and it was so annoying because they have this like big band around my belly to like hold the monitor. And of course it kept shifting when I would move, and they're like, oh, we lost the baby's heartbeat, like can we adjust that? And I was just like, dude. And so once they administered the pitocin, it was I think 4 hours from start until Rusty was born.
Whoa.
And
That's
yeah,
quick.
so it went pretty fast, but it
Yeah.
was so painful. Like those
Yeah.
contractions are insane. And now that I have a second birth to compare it to where there wasn't pitocin, looking back, it's like it just feels almost like a mechanical machine is like clamping down on you. All the contractions were like felt exactly the same, and they were like so perfectly evenly spaced that like I don't know, to feel like a birth that didn't have it, like the contractions like varied a little bit, and they would just kind of like ebb and flow. And so that was interesting to be able to compare.
Yeah, that's a
that.
great. I love that you state it as like a mechanical. Like I don't think I've heard it like described in that way, but that makes so much sense that it would be more like, yeah, a forced mechanical contraction and different from your natural hormonal contractions with your second son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I remember when it was at its most intense, right before he emerged, I was like up holding onto the back of the headboard of the hospital bed and on my knees, and the OB, she was great actually. She was really awesome. And but she's like, I really need you to get on your back, like, and I was just like, oh, I fucking knew this was gonna happen, and
Hmm.
fine. And I like just like on my back,
Hmm.
um and then of course the cord was like getting clamped at a certain point, and she's like, we really need to get him out, like, if he doesn't come out in the next like 30 seconds, like I'm gonna have to, I don't remember what she said, but like shortly thereafter she was like, I can get the vacuum or the forceps, Katie, if you think you want help. And I was like, no. And she, didn't push that. And but it was still like shitty to just be like in that coached pushing
Yeah, and like
environment.
having your authority taken over of like your preferred birthing position, like maybe if you had stayed in that position, he would have been born faster too. And she forced, like you felt forced to have to like submit to her authority and like lay on your back. And then, yeah,
Totally.
I'm
I know.
sorry.
And so yeah, she was, you know, doing what they
She's
do in the
trained.
hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just push, 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 push. You got this, you got this, you got this, you got this. Like, just, and um he eventually came out, and she let Roger catch him. And then of course they like attacked him with the towels to like, they wiped his vernix off, but they said it was like to clean his face so he could breathe. And I was just like, just hating like the nurses. Like I was just like, but I like couldn't stand. I couldn't like. I stood up as much as I could to them, but like I was just like, whatever. I'm in a hospital. I came here. I chose to be here, and so I kind of just like accepted it.
And you're in this like birth realm too. Like you just birthed your son. Like, yeah. And so how long did it take for you to be out for them like to let you hold him or what was that like?
So they put him on my chest right away, and I held him, and he um latched right on, and
Mm-hmm. And sorry, and during this point is when they were sort of like aggressively like using the cloths on them and like gloved hands and probably putting a stethoscope on his chest and things like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yep, they were doing all that. And of course, like right after he was born, they were like, we need to measure him. And so they took him away. Oh, and the cord thing. I delayed cord clamp in my birth plan, and I think he had been born for like a minute or two, and then they clamped it. And that's delayed for them, like,
Yeah.
and I like, whatever, like, of course the placenta's like in their way, and they can't do everything they need to do if the baby's like cord is still attached.
Attached. Yeah.
So
Yeah, they
so
can't take
yeah,
him away from you if he's still attached to your inside, which is how it's like meant to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, shortly after he was born, they wanted to measure him, and they did. And I have this picture of him. It must have just been like 10 or 15 minutes after he was born, and they laid him in those little carts with the clear sides.
Plastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like he's just laying there, and like I hate the picture so much, and it's just so sad to like
Mm.
I don't know, just like not in my arms and like, so yeah, I remember like after he had been born, like maybe within the hour, they were wanting to like get his feet print, like how they put that like black ink on their bottom of their feet. And she got one done, and then he was just like crying so hard. And I was like, just give him back to me. Like, I don't fucking care about the footprint. Like, and I just like took him back, and like I still have they like gave us this little book, like a children's book and in the front cover they have his birth time and his measurements, and like there's one of his feet print in there. And yeah, so then like we had a pretty like uneventful, or there was no like reason for them to be concerned, or there was like nothing
Mm-hmm.
going on. So I think like 4 hours after he was born, I was like, we want to leave. And like they were like, okay. Well, like before I said that, I was like, so we're like all good, right? And they're like, yeah, you guys are doing great. And I was like, okay, well, we want to go. And they were like, oh well, like he needs to see the pediatrician, and they don't really usually come until like the next day. And so I was like, well, I don't want to see the pediatrician. Like we want to leave. And they're like, well, okay, that's totally fine. You'll just have to leave and sign these papers that you're leaving against medical advice. And I was like, done. Show me the papers. And so I signed the papers, and we left the hospital at midnight and went home. And the next day I got a call from CPS, and they were like, yeah, we heard you left the hospital like without seeing the pediatrician.
Oh
And
my
like,
God.
so then like,
Whoa.
yeah.
Like, I mean, let's just say, like, you have so much strength to have, like, gone into the hospital and left the once, and then you go back in, and then to, like, leave 4 hours post birth. Like, I just want to, like, show you, tell you, mirror to you, like, how much strength that took. And I'm just, like, so proud of you for doing that. I know that wasn't easy. So, and then to have CPS called on you, like, what the heck? I'm so sorry.
Thank you for saying that. I know it was just so shitty. Like and like Roger was so great the whole time. Like he was just like, whatever you want to do, like, and then like CPS got called, and I'm sure he was just like, oh my gosh, like, and I was too. Like I was just like, what the fuck, dude? Like the nurses like made it seem like no big deal. Like, oh, you just have to sign these papers. They weren't
Right.
like, just so you know, if you leave, we have to call CPS by law. Like they didn't say that at
Right.
all.
Yeah, and I don't think that's actually true that they have to, but that they could and they were going to choose to. Like, that's the
Yeah.
fucked part. Yeah.
So
So they're like playing nice to your face and then called CPS behind your back.
yeah, yeah.
Gross.
Oh, it was so terrible. It was so shitty. It just like cast this dark cloud over the first month and a half or two of my postpartum, because then since I had tested positive for COVID, like no one could come over, no one could come over. We were supposed to be in quarantine, and like we were getting calls from the state health department, because like they would call everyone that tested positive for COVID to like monitor our symptoms, or like see how we're feeling, like all the shit. And they were like, yeah, just make sure you wear a mask around your baby and try not to kiss your baby. And I was just like, dude, like these, and I know they're just doing their job, but like I'm just like a woman said that to me. I'm like, do you have kids? Like you're insane. Like I'm not wearing a mask around my baby, and I'm going to kiss him a million times. Like, and so it was just the CPS people calling but not being able to come over because they needed to like verify that we had a crib and a proper car seat and that like, everything was safe, and but they couldn't come over because we were in quarantine, and so it just like prolonged that like
Mm-hmm.
clearing up of CPS. And then like my family like felt weird about coming over because we're supposed to be in quarantine, so like I had some like food prepared, but I was so underprepared for postpartum, and then not being able, like, I was underprepared in terms of just like logistical things, but then not having support of like people coming over like just made it even harder. And then with like the CPS like looming over my head, it was just like, oh, such a shitty time.
Wow. Yes. That's so much. Because, like, yeah, in postpartum, you need people around you and to be with you. And it's already like stressful enough and like sleepless. And it's this whole new experience. And then having to also deal with, yeah, CPS and then like the government calling you about like your symptoms. And it just was, I mean, it's hard enough just like by itself with full support present, but take away the support and then add in these other stressors. That is just like, so what a challenge. How hard.
It was brutal. Barack was my rock, and
Yes.
he was so like supportive and loving, and it's just amazing that we like got along so well, considering the fact that like we never even talked about kids or like, I don't know, just so many things. Like when COVID struck, I remember, people being so divided about masks and like back
Mhm.
stuff. And he and I were on like the same page, thank God, because I know a lot of people that like their relationships like fell apart because they just thought in different ways in terms of like what was going on in the world. And so we were unified in that way. And yeah, so
Yes. And but breastfeeding for you, said he, latched easily. And yeah, how was that, the rest of that for you?
breastfeeding was amazing with Rusty. He had the perfect latch. He just ate so good, and he slept in bed with me, and it was amazing and so easy. It was easy, and I know that breastfeeding isn't always easy. And so like, yeah, I after um since I breastfed Rusty, like going into my second pregnancy, I just like was like, oh, breastfeeding is amazing. Like it's so easy, and I don't know why everyone doesn't do it. And I just had this really idealistic view of breastfeeding, and um, I still do, but I just know that it's not always easy. So, but
Yes.
I'm so glad it was easy because it was like one of the few easy things
Yeah, you
about.
needed something to be easy in that mess of like, whoa. Yes.
Yeah.
I realized that you didn't speak to your placenta in the hospital. Would you mind
Oh
telling me
yeah.
what you remember about that?
Uh, I I told them I wanted it. We
Mm-hmm.
brought it and cut pieces and froze it, and I drank it in smoothies. And I actually don't think I finished every piece. Like um I think I threw part of it away because it was like we were moving, and I don't know, I should have been a little bit more like respectful about that, but I had still a lot of growing and learning to do. And yeah, I was like, but I like had the intention of like keeping it and consuming it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you consumed what felt good to you. And, let's face it, like you even asking it to come home with you was respecting it in a way that they would have just like discarded it or done something else with it that we don't know what they do with it. But yeah, so you did respect your placenta. Did they hurry it out of you? Like, was that something that you
Oh,
remember or?
oh, so yeah, no, well, she did say, can you give another good push for your placenta? And I did, and it just came out. So
Nice.
well, actually, I remember right after he was born, she told the nurse, she's like, to give me more pitocin, like because they give it to you in like a rate, like an amount
Yeah.
per time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I remember her saying like you didn't need much pitocin. Like I think it was like 2 or 4 units. I don't know how they like what the like
Like,
units they measure it in, like
right.
grams, whatever it is. But it was like 2 units, and then I think they upped it a little bit right before he was born, and then or no, they upped it like throughout the labor, and then right before, or maybe it was right after he was born, she was like told him to push it up to like 8, so then my placenta would come out, and
Yeah.
it did come right out. Like I remember her saying, "Can you give a little push?" And I pushed, and it just came.
Mm-hmm. Good. That's nice. But they were
Yeah.
giving you, you said that they didn't just give you the Pitocin, they also gave you like extra IV fluids on top of that that you did not consent to.
Oh, I don't think they did.
Okay.
I don't think they did.
It was just
But
having the
I was
IV in
still,
general.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
still like connected to that apparatus, and that's
Yeah. And that sucks.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, so then, yeah, the beginning of postpartum is like a mess, but also beautiful and wonderful, and breastfeeding is going well, and you and Roger are in this like beautiful time in your relationship and aligning on so many things. And then, yeah, take me to as Rusty gets a little bigger and your next pregnancy, and what else would
Yeah.
you like to share?
So Rusty was 8 months old when I got pregnant with Race, and that wasn't planned, of course. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I'm pregnant again. Like, I had got my period back, I had had it for a few months, and I was like just becoming aware of the fertility awareness method, and um, it was still kind of irregular. So yeah, it was kind of tricky in that time to really do any tracking just because I wasn't sleeping through the night and breastfeeding. So yeah, I found out I was pregnant, and that pregnancy was like physically super easy, and I wasn't tired or super hungry like I was with Rusty. And I yeah, I felt really good the whole time. I physically, and also stuff came up with my mom during that pregnancy too, but not as severely.
Mm-hmm.
And then I knew I wanted a free birth, and I found you, and we left Missoula. That's where we were living, and we moved
Yeah.
to
But when we first were in contact, like the plan was for me to like drive from where I live to you, yes? And then you moved further away.
yeah, yeah, like just knew that we just had to get away. Like I needed space for my family, and I just didn't think I would um just be able to like focus as much with so much family around. And so yeah, we moved to Billings, which is 5 hours drive from Missoula, and that's when I knew that like you for sure weren't going to be there. Um and that's when I just really started like leaning into, just like taking full responsibility for things. And yeah.
Mhm. I remember there was like, yeah, some boundary setting with your mom that was new for you that we had dialogue about in our time working together.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember telling her, I don't want to talk to you about my pregnancy, my birth plans, breastfeeding, sleeping arrangements until after the baby is born. And if you ask me, I will politely remind you that I don't want to talk about it. And if you keep asking me, I won't talk to you until after the baby's born. And she respected that. I think maybe she asked probably well, no, I know before I set the boundary, she asked if I was going to have a midwife. And I said, yes, I have a midwife because I did. You were like that for me. And she didn't ask, is there going to be a midwife at your birth? I don't know if I would have lied or what if she asked that, but I was just like, yep, I have a midwife. And she knew like not to, pursue that line of questioning. And then I set the boundary, and it was like pretty smooth sailing. And yeah, and that was a huge thing for me, like saying that to her. Like it was huge.
Yes, I remember. I remember. And I was, yeah, still, yeah. So the strength that you and the growth that you had, like I feel like from like our beginning dialogue to like the ending, like there was so much, you just got really clear and you had this strength and were just, you really stepped into this like next version of yourself who are now, or maybe even you've done that again probably since that moment in time, but just I really got to observe this incredible, beautiful, like I'm getting chills like speaking about it, this like shift in you. It makes me want to cry. Like, yeah. Hmm.
It was awesome. I yeah, having moved to Billings and just kind of stepping away was totally necessary, but it was so hard because we didn't have any support, you know, in-person support. We in Billings, and we went to church there, and I made a half-assed effort to like find people, and just nothing came to fruition. And I had, like, as a last resort, I had a couple neighbors that I would be willing to ask for help if I needed it, but for my postpartum. But yeah, it was just me and Roger and Rusty and this little baby in my belly, and we just yeah, we just did it.
And how was nursing for you while having this other little wombling inside of you?
Gosh, that was rough. The first few months were fine. So I found out at the very beginning of July that I was pregnant, and I continued to breastfeed for a couple months. And then once I think September started coming around, my supply began to dry up, and I started giving Rusty oat milk, which I look back and I'm just like, the fuck was I thinking? I, um, so yeah, but I would still let him latch, and that's how he would fall asleep for his naps and at night. And when he woke in the middle of the night, that's how he was going back to sleep. And then I started having aversions, and man, that was so rough. Like I had to just eventually like stop, and that was just a really hard thing. Like
Yeah.
I would, oh man,
I
I
remember
just,
there was like a mourning within that process too of like, your little babe and, to have that separation from him and then, asking Roger to step in a new way for him and
yeah, yeah. And it was not how I envisioned our breastfeeding relationship to end. Like I wanted to breastfeed him until he was ready to stop. And um I like I remember being like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine having two babies in my bed. Like I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then um so it was really a blessing that I my supply did dry up, because like it just wouldn't have I wouldn't have wanted two babies in my bed. And um if my supply continued, I don't think I would have had the strength to stop breastfeeding him.
Mhm.
So it my supply dried up with enough time for us to get into a different rhythm. And yeah.
Yeah.
But
And what was that like? What would you remember the transition of stopping and did he stay sleeping in bed with you or did he move to a different space?
so um he got the picture that he couldn't latch. I would just wear a shirt at night, and like it was it didn't take too many nights, or just like a few nights of me not letting him latch. And um instead of latching, what he would do is he would put his hands into little fists like this, and go like this in my armpits. And it was just his way of he'd smuggle up to me. And at first I thought it was so cute. And then after a couple months, I just got so I just wanted to sleep, and I didn't want him digging in my armpits. And it was just I was like, he needs to go. Like he can't be in our bed anymore. And we um we put a bed in a different room, and I would sit with him in his while he slept in it, or was trying to fall asleep in his bed. And it was really hard. I remember just being like, I know this is really hard, but I know you can do it. And I was just really firm and gentle. And I slept on the couch in the living room, which was right by his room. And so anytime he woke up, I would go in there and comfort him, pick him up and hold him, but try to not like be as much of a sleep crutch anymore. And I think after 2 weeks, he was maybe waking up one or two times in the night, but it was so hard to transition him into his own bed, for me.
Mhm.
Or it was hard for both of us, and
Yeah.
so needed to happen. It so needed to happen. So it was
Mhm.
because I knew that was the way we had to go. So there wasn't any questioning or doubting myself. And so in
Mhm.
that simple, I was just like, this is what we have to do. And yeah.
Yeah, and then once he was more used to being in this other place, that allowed you to get a deeper rest or
Yeah.
yeah.
So that was the end of January, and Race was born end of March. So that was 2 months of relatively better sleep, but still hearing phantom cries, and um just not sleeping very well because of just being pregnant and uncomfortable. And so it was still not great sleep, but it was a step in the right direction. And I knew that it was for both of our good for us to be like sleeping separately. So
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So then as you move towards this next birth, like what challenges did you have to navigate as you approached? Like I remember Roger having some certain concerns that, you had some dialogue with him about, we had some dialogue together. Like, yeah, I wonder if
yeah,
you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that.
absolutely. So I think the hardest thing to navigate was accepting his fears and like knowing that even though my mom's not asking or my sisters aren't asking, like they're having their fears too. And it was hard for me to just like accept that um and just allow them to have their fears and to just like even my own fears like that I had just I was still like I'm going to do it and maybe I'm going to do it a little bit scared and maybe the people around me have their fears but that doesn't need to like change my course of action and so that was hard and then like not having people to hang out with um that kind of was hard too just towards the end when I was like not feeling like I could give Rusty my full like presence because I'm like preoccupied with being pregnant and stuff like he didn't really have people to play with and I didn't have people to play with and but yeah, so those were the hard things.
I remember specifically like because Rusty had his umbilical cord around his neck, like that was one of the like, yeah.
Yeah, so when Rusty was born, the doctor like quickly like after his head emerged, she saw that he had the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck and she quickly like undid it and he was born and so Roger, that was like his big fear in terms of the actual birth, like what if he can't emerge because his umbilical cord is wrapped around his neck? And then I remember it was just such a beautiful way of um like presenting a different way of looking at it. You said, what if the cord is wrapped around the neck because it's so long and so it doesn't, get in the way of his emergence? And um you just did such a good job of like just like being an outsider and like but still like kind of like not mediating but like kind of like seeing both of us because I was like you know very preoccupied with like myself and the baby and it was hard for me to like empathize with Roger because like I'm home with Rusty all the time and I'm the one that's pregnant. Like, how can, it was hard for me to like see him and like hear him and, you know, just be more objective and like, yeah, just empathize with him.
But yeah, I mean that's such a common fear for women, for people, for the people around the umbilical cord. And I think it's, yeah, like 1/3 of babies have it wrapped around their neck. And for, to some, there's this theory that it can be a protective thing, like you said, so that it's not like above their head, because that's where it's really a dangerous place for it to be. where if the umbilical cord is coming out first or like with the head, that's where it can get compressed and be a real problem and be called a cord prolapse. And I remember we just talked about how, like, I showed you, sent a few videos of where, you know, women had, like, babies are sometimes fully emerge with the cord still wrapped around their neck, and, you know, the mothers just remove the cord, and that if you felt like it was prohibiting, you know, your baby entering the world, that you could just unwrap the cord, and that it didn't have to be like a pathologized like problem, that it's just a variation of normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember? I'm trying to remember if there was like anything. I remember that was like the thing that Roger was like, that was his like kind of stuck point within like his major fear. Yeah, and I feel like I can't remember like a specific like fear that yeah, do you remember if there was something specific that you really needed to sort of work through?
I I don't, you know, of course I was like, what if race didn't move very much in my belly. I remember it would seem like
Mm-hmm.
a whole day would go by and he just wouldn't even move in there. And so I had a lot of like questioning of like, is he okay? Like, is he dead? Like, and and then he was like, I went past 43 weeks. So then that became like even more heightened. And I was,
Mm-hmm.
I think was the hardest for me was he was so like chill in there that I was just like, oh my gosh, is he gonna be stillborn? Like, is he alive? And
Mm-hmm. And I do remember you speaking about, you know, like Rusty, because like Rusty was going to be there, right? You, Roger, and Rusty were going to be in this birthing time together. And like, what if Rusty needs something, or, you know, like how you were going to work together as a family with that.
yeah, yeah, that was like a not a fear, but I was like kind of like a point of stress because we didn't have anyone that could come hang out with Rusty. We didn't, you know, we just didn't know. We just really were like trusting in God that like it would just work out.
Mm-hmm. And this time, I feel like I remember you preparing differently food wise. Like, I remember you speaking to like making these different meals and putting them in the freezer for yourself, like knowing that you would need that easy nourishment postpartum.
Yeah, yeah, I made bone broth and soup and froze it in baggies and I just got like we bought like a bunch of eggs and I think Roger and I ate eggs and like egg and cheese burritos for breakfast for like the first month or something just because it was like easy and nutritious but um yeah, I did all the meal prep and my mom like sent us some food and um yeah, it
Do you
was
want to pause for your little man right now, or?
sure just a second.
Yeah, okay.
We're I tried not to get too um particular about like the food. I knew as long as we had like eggs and soup and you know, I got like a bunch of pot roast and we ate like soup or pot roast for like a month for dinners and it was great.
Wonderful. And what other ways did like you prepare your space, or like what other aspects do you want to speak to of like the preparing for labor and birth before you speak to this labor that you had?
Yeah, so I didn't do much. I had some candles ready to be lit and I had, like a bowl for the placenta and a sheet of painter's plastic to lay on our bed, and then a blanket to put on top of that for when I actually was laboring. And um, part of me is like, oh, I wish I would have like made it more like a sanctuary, but like the other part of me is just like, I'm just not like super like into like decorations and like, and not that it's about decorations, but I don't know, I just I didn't really do that much in terms of like making it like a sanctuary other than having candles. It was just like, I'm
No,
just
but
gonna
it
light
was
these
still like your
candles and
cozy place. I mean, but that's what I love. Like birth is so simple. Like you don't need a bunch of things. You don't need to like create this specific space. Like you are really the only thing that is needed in your birth. And yeah, it can be so simple. I feel like we can complicate it. So I love that you're speaking to like the simplicity and it was your home and so it was your safe space and with your husband and your son and yeah, and you said you were 43 weeks. Yes. So how did that feel to like move beyond like the weeks of pregnancy that you had experienced before?
yeah, it was a challenge. I just um I kind of, since Rusty was, you know, I was past the 40 weeks with him. I think I was like 41 and 3 with him. And so I was kind of like prepared, like to go past that 40 weeks, but it like somehow oh, another thing, like just to back up a little bit, I didn't tell people my due date. I just said he'll, or in March. I just said March because the 40 weeks was at the beginning of March.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of a long story, I won't get into it, but basically my family found out that I was due at the beginning of March. And um, also, we didn't know it was a boy. I did a blood test that you said, so we knew he was a. Um, so, yeah, once I was. So, if my family wouldn't have known that I was at, the 40-week mark was at the beginning of March, I think it would have been easier to go that far past because I was like 43 and a half weeks. And but then knowing that they knew, and like I didn't set that boundary with my sisters that I set with my mom. And
Mm-hmm.
so they were, we know that you're due or he's due at the beginning of March, and like we know what you have planned. And um I forget if I think I just told everyone I have a midwife because I did, and but I was just very vague. And so they were just kind of like saying things that, their concerns, but like at the same time being like, but I trust you and blah, blah, blah. But it still was just like, I just didn't want to talk to anyone at all except Roger and you. And I was just like, it was just hard because I knew they were all worrying.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the work. That was, the like that's where the growth happens. And that's when like the trust that I have in myself really matters. When like that there's people that, and it's not like I was taking it personally, like, oh, they don't believe in me, but like, just like knowing that on some level they didn't believe in themselves. in a certain way, and that they were like, and so how could they believe in me if they didn't like believe in themselves on that certain level, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
like really time for me to step up, and I did.
Yeah. You didn't like change your plan. You just continued on and allowing your little man to come when on his timing. Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. I remember like a neighbor that was like some interaction with a neighbor that was like annoying.
oh my gosh, I just like didn't take shit from anyone, you know. I just like handle it. Like this old lady that lived across the street from us, she was like, and I'm like, so I didn't tell my family my due date, but I did tell other people who I didn't think would like make an issue of it, or, you know, like make comments, but, and that was a mistake. I should just say spring, you know, not even not narrow it down to a month, like sometime next year, you know. Anyway, so I happened to tell her that like when my 40-week mark was, and um every day she would, you know, Rusty would be playing outside and I'd be like out there with him, and she'd go for her walk and say, "You haven't popped yet?" or "When are you gonna have that baby?" And oh my gosh, I just couldn't even handle it. Like he like totally realized that I was just like, "Don't fucking talk to me, lady." Like
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
like I couldn't even like pretend to like laugh. I couldn't even feel the comment. I was just like, just
Yeah. Ignore.
ignore. Oh, it was terrible. So there was just like still these annoyances, and like, you know, the people not like trusting, and but that's like where the work is. Like you're never
Mm-hmm.
gonna have, and like always gonna be people that doubt you, and not like, again, like I don't take that personally, but like it's still something you have to deal with. And
Mm-hmm.
but I got good at just being like, fuck everyone, like I'm doing this, and I know that Roger believes in me. I know that Amana believes in me. I believe in me, and like I don't care what, like I don't care what these people think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and like, and it's hard because fear is just often just part of this like path of birth, no matter where you're choosing to birth. Like most women carry some fear, and it's just about like allowing it to be there, but not letting it like totally shift and change what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yes. So, yeah, you and I are communicating, voice messaging, having video calls here and there, and you knew that I was available to you night or day if you wanted to call me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so yeah, take us to when does labor begin for you, for him?
So I, like I said, I was 43 in a couple days, 43 weeks in a couple days, I and at that point Roger and I were sleeping in different rooms because we were renting a trailer, like a mobile home, and like the master bedroom, mine and Roger's bedroom was on one end of the house, and then Rusty's bedroom was on the other end of the house. And I knew that if he woke up in the middle of the night, I may or may not hear him, you know, being on the opposite end of the house. And I knew that I like just Roger needed to be the one to like respond to him. So Roger was sleeping in the room next to his. And so I laid down to go to sleep on a two no Monday night, the 28th of March, and I started having contractions, and they I forget like the spacing, but it was like they started out like, less than 10 minutes apart, and then they just slowly and gradually became closer and closer together, and they slowly became more intense. And I remember just being so tired. Like, I, as soon as a contraction would hit, I would like get on all fours and just breathe through the contraction. And then as soon as the contraction stopped, I'd just like lay back down and fall asleep and like into the deepest sleep. And then I had my phone, so I was seeing like what time I was having the contractions, and the next contraction would come, and I would look at my phone, and it was like I had been in the deepest, most restful sleep, but it had only been 3 minutes. And
So
this just went,
incredible.
and I know it was so amazing. Like, this just went on all night. Like, it didn't let up at all. And then the sun rose, and I don't remember if I told Roger or not if I was having contractions, because I didn't want him to like get excited, and then like if the contractions died off, like I just didn't I just wanted him to rest. And so I don't think I told him at night. And then like early the next morning I went in there and I was like, you I've been having contractions, like I think you should stay home from work, and let's cover the bed, and let's get all the birth supplies out. And then
And we talked
Rusty,
that morning, right? Like, I feel like
yeah,
early, yeah.
we did, yeah, because like the sun rose and Roger woke up and the contractions slowed down, and I was like, oh gosh, like this could be just the first of many nights, like I just didn't really like, I wasn't like, today's the day, I didn't know. And I had like contractions throughout the morning. I think they slowed down for like 2 hours, and then like Roger and Rusty were just like hanging out, and Roger would like check on me, but I was just mostly alone in the room, and I was really loud, like vocalizing through the contractions. And um I remember Roger's like, "Do you need anything? Like, can I help you?" And I was like, "No." And I asked him for chocolate milk, and he got me some chocolate milk, and that was like the only thing I consumed during the labor. And um and then they picked back up around like 10 a.m. And then it was time for Rusty to go down for his nap at like 11, I think. And so Roger put him down for his nap, and naps were still really rocky at that time. Like, I remember just being like, "Oh, I hope he sleeps good," because like I was being really loud, like I said. And um so he ended up taking like a 3 hour nap, which was like an like unprecedented. Like, and I was like screaming the whole time. And so it was just like double amazing. And and then I think for the last hour, like after Roger put Rusty down, Roger came in the room, and he was just like on his phone, like just next to me on the bed. And like part of my brain was like, oh my gosh, why is he on his phone? But, or like, it wasn't even like that. Like, I was just like, oh, he's on his phone. And it was just fine. Like, some people might not have been okay with that or been like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? But like, I just knew that he just like needed, or he was like just doing whatever he was comfortable with at the time. And like, I didn't need him for anything. And he was there and available. And he was just,
Hmm.
I remember he like, it was like really getting really intense, and he like asked me if I wanted to pray the rosary, and I was like, no, not right now. And um just like, dude, no, I'm like screaming every 30 seconds. And so funny. He was just like, that was like the only like comfort or like he's just like, maybe she'll want to pray, or maybe that would help, and I was just like, no. But I it was just got really intense, and then I remember like having him open the blinds to our bedroom, because I think they had been closed for like the morning, and I wanted to like be able to see out the window, um and then like my water broke, and
And were you on hands and knees still? You spoke to like being on hands and knees at first. Was that your preferred? Yeah.
yep. And then I started feeling like I was like, I need to push, like I'm just gonna start pushing, and I don't know if it's time, like, but I'm gonna do it. And so I started pushing, and I pushed for like 45 minutes with each contraction. And by that point, I was like on my knees, but like resting back on my arms, but like
Mm-hmm.
pretty up. And I just started pushing, and then I felt his head start emerging, and I was like, and that's when I was like, Roger, his head's coming. And he like came around, and he's like, oh yeah, sure as shit. And um he's like, what do you want me to do? And I was just like lower him to the bed when he comes out, because I was like, it would have been like a little drop to the bed. And then I like felt him emerge, and he just like slid right out. And um I remember it was like there was like this snow squall. It was snowing, like the biggest snowflakes, just like so heavy, and like just melting on the ground. And it was just like spring in Montana. And um yeah, and then he just came out, and then a few minutes later I just like gave another push, and the placenta came out. And his cord was super short. It was like before I pushed the placenta out, I could barely have him up to my chest. So I was relieved when the placenta came out, and I just held him close, and I felt so good. Like I it was just so amazing. Like he's here.
Yes, you were just blissed out. And like you said, you had these different like rhythm of contractions that were, you know,
Yeah.
built across time and had some variation. And you just,
And I remember I would just be like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. This is so painful. Like it was really painful at times. And then like right when I needed it, like a contraction like would be not so strong. And I was just like, oh thank God, like just a little bit of relief. And then I just remember there being like this duality of like in my head of like, oh, this is really hard. Like, do I have a tincture that I can take? And then that other voice is just like, nothing is this powerful. Like, and then like there is just like this like back and forth in my head of like what if, or just I don't know, just like a voice of doubt, and then a voice of just like, it was like, yeah, I hear you. Yeah, this is really hard, but like we're gonna do it. And it was just interesting to like witness that in my head, because it was almost like I was beyond those voices, but like
mhm.
back and forth of like, oh, this is really hard, and then like this is what we've been waiting for, like. And so it was just so like mind blowing.
Yes. And then you got to experience this like natural unfolding of like all the hormonal cascade without the like pit on top of it or
Yeah.
obstructing it. You didn't have that obstruction in this labor.
Yeah. And there was just so easy. And I remember for like the first few days, I was just like so blissed out. Like just, oh, my heart was just like overflowing with like love, and just, it was amazing. Like, I I still remember just so vividly, like just being like having like the biggest sense of like accomplishment and freedom, and it was amazing.
And trust in yourself and your body and your baby and your family. Like, yeah, I remember that like image you sent to me and you were just like glowing and full of bliss. And like you said, just, yeah, you had the birth that you were dreaming of and planning for and envisioning for yourself and your family and your baby.
Yeah, it was amazing. Oh, yeah.
Hmm. And what would you like to share about like postpartum before we close here with
Well, I
these?
feel like I should say that our breastfeeding journey was like not smooth sailing like it was with Rusty. And I think a part of me thought like, oh, if I have a free birth, like everything is gonna be easy. And like it's so not the case. Like the birth is just the birth, and it's not something that you should do so that you have an easier postpartum, or it's just like an end in itself. And don't expect, and like the birth might be easy, but that doesn't make anything, or that's no guarantee. And so the fact that the breastfeeding was just so hard was almost like a slap in the face, but like so necessary, because it was just so humbling. And it was just like a reality check. Like you got the birth, but like there's still a lot of work to do, and that this is just the beginning. And yeah, his latch just wasn't great, and he was getting like plenty of nourishment, and he didn't have any ties, I'm sure. And he wasn't like especially gassy or anything, but his latch just like didn't feel very good. Like it was just felt like a lot of nipple stimulation. So I I don't know. I just like kind of had aversions in the beginning a little bit, which was really weird and difficult. And um I ended up pumping, which I never like thought I would do. And I just ended up in our breastfeeding journey, it was like all these things that I never thought I would do, or things that I may have been judgy about towards other moms, that I was finding myself doing, and was just like, okay, now I get it. Like now I get why some breastfeed. And like it was just a really big learning experience for me. And like I said, so humbling, because I think, yeah, I just like it just brought me into my humanity. Like I was just like, wow, like all along I've just had so many like judgmental like thoughts, and like been like comparing, and just all this stuff that is so unproductive. And it was like my time to learn that like, everyone does their best, and just because somebody is giving their baby formula does not mean anything. I cannot just assume things about people, or assume things about breastfeeding. And it's just, I was just like, whoa, okay. It was like a big,
Yeah. I mean, it's like a life lesson, right? Like we have no idea what it's like to be in another person's shoes, and we never fully can. Like we only know what our experience has been, but to judge people based on what our experience has been and not their like lifelong experiences is, yeah, just not fair. And yet it's so, I think, normalized in today's society. But I love that you were able to take this as like, yeah, a lesson of like, yeah, non-judgment and acceptance and, love towards other and tenderness towards other mothers and women.
absolutely. It was, yeah, the whole journey, like just with, from the breastfeeding aspect alone, has been just so rich in like challenges and joy and lessons, that like just that part of being a mother alone is like enough to, I don't know, just really change a person.
Mhm. Yeah. And so, yes, you just had a birthday, and
Yeah.
now you have two little boys that are close in age. And yeah, how is that feeling for you and your family?
It's feeling really good and challenging, and it's really, made me get good at focusing on what's in front of me and not worrying about everything, like things down the road, things in the past, like recognizing all these patterns that have been passed down through the generations. And like I've like just recently realized that like I do not need to like feel responsible for like undoing all these generations of trauma. Like I just need to focus on what's in front of me and be aware and take responsibility for my own healing, and you know treating my kids and husband with kindness and love, and doing like my job as a mother with joy in my heart. And yeah, it's been really hard, but like so good.
Yes, yes, you're such a beautiful mom, such a beautiful human.
Thank you so.
Oh, is there anything you want to share about like after Race's birth, like and how your family like accepted, or what did you tell them about the birth, or what was that like, the integration with them?
Yeah, so they were all like just blown away and so proud of me. And like I think my mom, just to like end, or like finish out that story, like she knew I had a midwife, but I I think I just was like, yeah, I didn't end up calling my midwife, and she didn't like pursue a line of questioning or anything. And so they knew that like it was just us, just me and Roger and Rusty and Race. And um everyone was just super excited and like proud of me. And yeah, there was no like drama or anything.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes. And so, yeah, I feel like you spoke to Rusty being asleep, and so he stayed asleep until after Race was born. Just
Yeah,
to...
yeah. So he slept um until like 1 or 2, because I remember Race had been born, or he had been like, birthed for like at least an hour or two. So it was like perfect timing. Like he woke up and like, the placenta was out and like things had calmed down, and like he like just came and like saw this new baby, and like he was so funny. Like he he was like like excited and just kind of like looking at him with awe. But then he like in the first few days he like started to realize that like he's here to stay, and he would like run into a corner and just like rest his head on the wall, and like he'd like kick the wall, like he was like upset about, or he's just like, oh darn it, and like, but then he'd like be fine. And oh, it was just so like precious to see him like get to know Race and be like, oh, he's not going anywhere, and he's like this new baby that I have to share my mom and dad with. And but it's just so cool to see them like grow together.
Yes, beautiful.
Uh,
Is there anything else you'd like to share about your births or
I
motherhood or sistership or anything?
Yeah, I was just gonna say like working with you has been just such a blessing, and there's just you filled your role so beautifully, and like you like kind of led the way, but like made it feel like you didn't need to be there at all, but like you totally did. And I loved having you there, but like you just like, I don't know, you like worked yourself out of a job. Like, you know what I mean? Like if
Yeah,
I
and I
haven't,
didn't need to be there, and you didn't call, right? Like you didn't call me when you were pushing and birthing. You didn't.
yeah, but like anytime I had like a question or a challenge, you just did such a good job of like reflecting back to me the question or the challenge, and like maybe offering guidance, but also like I was always like responsible. Like you didn't, assume any responsibility, but like you just showed me how to find that in me, like showed me how to, or like led me to myself, if that makes sense. Like,
No, it does. I mean, I try to explain it to people sometimes. They're like, but what do you do? And I'm just like, well, it's so hard to put into words. And so I get why you're, yeah, struggling with it a little bit. But yeah, I don't have your answers. You have your answers. I can be a
yeah,
sounding board and a mirror, and I can invite you to different possibilities, but you're the one making the choices and leading your life.
yeah, you just did it so beautifully. It just always felt so like good and pure, like our interactions.
Hmm. Wow, it's been such an honor, and I'm so grateful for our friendship and our sistership, and that you also sing to me with your voice messages. So many people don't want to sing, but I love that you are willing to sing to me via voice message. And I'm grateful that we continue our dialogue across this time together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
Thank you for tuning in today to the Heart of the Soul. If you love the podcast, I would be so grateful if you would choose to subscribe, rate, review, or share the show. If you feel aligned with me and my energy, if you are wanting to unearth your wild inner knowing, birth your baby wild and free, navigate the medical system, move through grief, receive an intuitive mediumship reading, or debrief and integrate a traumatic birth experience, I support women just like you all over the world. This is absolutely my soul work to support and encourage other women from womb to tomb. And working with my clients, I have witnessed women claim their wild, place and hold new boundaries with loved ones, and live more fully unto themselves. In Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, she says, "Wild woman is an endangered species. We have to become protectionists. We have to be the ones to give birth to more and more wild women, both within ourselves, but also in our daughters and our nieces and our granddaughters, and all women that we can engender with this life-fulfilling and life-giving spirit. We are the new generation of wild women." I believe that women claiming their sovereignty and remembering their wild will truly transform the world. To learn more or book your free connection call, go to my website, www.birthingnova.love. I would just love to connect with you. Until next time, remember, be brave, be loved, be wild, be you, and be the change that you seek for yourself and for the generations to come.